I really tried with this one, and I was just making sure I had like all the right color schemes that I wanted.
That's like the most nerve-wracking part. Is like I know the info, but like, does it look good?
Right.
Ah, yes, the fat squirrels are now thundering around on my roof.
All right, this is actually a stream about them now. Please show us the fat squirrels.
They're on my roof. How can I show them?
Get up there. What do you work out for? Clamber up on that roof.
Anyway, we are now live streaming on YouTube. So welcome to this, we're going to start our asexuality workshop facilitated by Clarissa Webb, who uses she or he or they pronouns. Take your pick. Um, and we'll start in a few minutes as more folks are joining us. And I'm also going to share the stream on Facebook. All right. For the Facebook, so that way Facebook can also view it.
Be keeping an eye on the Facebook page for any like incoming questions on that front.
Okay. How long should I wait before I get started then?
What do you think, Nathan?
Um, do we have more participants or is this it's the four of us? I mean, up
More
to
of
you
us
if you want.
here. There could also be people just planning on hopping on via the Facebook. There could be, you never know.
Right. So if you keep an eye on the Facebook, I'll keep an eye on the YouTube then.
Sounds
And
good.
that'll make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, up to you, facilitator, Clarissa.
Yeah, we're just here to
If
support
you
you
want
at this point.
Okay.
if you want to start like now, or if you give it for a few more minutes, if the folks want to join us on the WebEx. And then just a reminder to folks that are watching either live or later that this does count for signature credit. So either let us know or sign up on the signature, and then you whether or not you attended. I'll leave it up to you, Clarissa.
Let's wait a few more minutes just to see.
Sure. go ahead and copy and paste the attendance URL and put it in the YouTube as well.
All right, I think I'm good to get started. So to everyone here and anyone watching in the future, welcome to my Asexual Spectrum and Opening a Conversation on Sexual Intimacy workshop. My name is Clarissa. I go by she, he, they pronouns. I am currently gender questioning, so it's a great fun time. And I just want to say thank you all for showing up, or thank you all for watching. It makes me really happy that people find this content important to them as well, because it's very important to me. Before we get started, I do want to let everyone know that this is a safe space in the comments, in the current presentation, in the future comments. So I do ask that everybody be respectful when we're talking, and especially when they're asking questions. I do encourage questions being asked, and I do want to give a warning that we will be talking about some sexual intimacy. So if you need to leave or take a breather, that's fine, or pause the video and take a lap, go ahead. I just want everybody to feel safe in this space. And it is a little interactive. I don't know how interactive it'll be in the future, but in the current presentation, the participation is encouraged, but it is not required. So without further ado, I do have a question. I am about to list a few identities, and I just want to know how many people have heard of. I guess if anybody wants to respond, they can. They can either go to polleverywhere.com/firepureed, or they can text firepureed to 22333. And A represents you recognize one identity, and then all the way down to E, you recognize all 5 identities. So the 5 identities I'm going to list are asexual, demisexual, graysexual, allosexual, aromantic, and I'll list them again. So we have asexual, demisexual, graysexual, allosexual, and aromantic. Woohoo! Everyone's heard. Well, at least in this presentation. So for those of you who don't know, here are some of the most common terms people hear when they think of asexuality. So first of all, we have asexual, which is someone who feels little to no sexual attraction to somebody else. And they are represented by the flag that has the black stripe on top and then the purple stripe on the bottom. Then we have demisexual, which is what I identify as. And what demisexual really means is sexual attraction is formed only when a strong bond is made with another person or persons. And they are represented by the flag with the sideways triangle. Similarly to demisexual, graysexual is someone who experiences sexual attraction only sometimes. So this isn't always a constant thing. It can be erratic depending on the person. This fluctuates a lot of the time for someone who is graysexual. And they are represented by the flag that I have over here with the purple stripe on the bottom and on the top. The next term I have is allosexual, and this is just saying that this is somebody who does experience sexual attraction, or what normal is, or the average, but I don't like using those words. So I use allosexual because there's no such thing as normal. Everyone's different, and then if everyone identifies differently. So I prefer using allosexual when describing people who do experience sexual attraction. And then aromantic is someone who experiences little to no romantic attraction to other people, but they do still have sexual attraction, or they can have sexual attraction. You can even use this term to be partnered with other terms. For instance, someone could be aromantic and asexual, so they experience little romantic attraction and little sexual attraction. I personally identify as someone who is biromantic, so I am romantically attracted to masculine or feminine presenting people. And I am demisexual, so that means I don't feel that sexual attraction until a bond is formed. And aromantic is represented by the green flag here. And like demi-romantic and gray romantic, biromantic have their own flags as well. However, those are not the only terms when it comes to the asexual spectrum. So the question here is, why do we need to know more microlabels? Well, it's to help be inclusive and have people who show that there are communities out there for everybody. I never knew that the asexuality existed until I finally looked it up, because I personally thought I was broken, like something was wrong with me for people who didn't feel sexual attraction, because all my friends would talk about it and I'm over there in the corner like, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm just going to continue reading my books. And I originally identified as bisexual because I didn't really see males that way and I didn't really see females that way, so I'm like, I must be somewhere in between. And this just goes to show that not all labels fit everybody, and it's okay to not even want a label. Some people feel great just identifying as a human being, and that's great. The reason why we have these labels is to create a community, so that way people can go to others and be able to bounce back ideas and talk about things without feeling judged. So let's go into some of these labels. So the first label I have here is ace flux, and this is somebody who identifies with an experience of a fluctuating sexual attraction. For the most part, this does typically stay on the asexual spectrum. So similar to how gender fluid people can be more masculine or feminine when it comes to a day-to-day basis, someone who is ace flux can feel a different form of sexual attraction. Now, just because this is ace flux, it doesn't mean it necessarily stays on the asexual spectrum. It can spill into the allosexual spectrum as well. Next, we have ace spike, and this is somebody who identifies with a sexual attraction that appears very suddenly and very rare, and then just as quickly, that sexual attraction disappears. So then, how is this different than being gray sexual? So when I think about the differences between being a gray ace or an ace spike individual, for gray ace, the feelings of sexual attraction occur sometimes, and they can spike or they can dip, and it is just a fluctuating experience. Whereas a spike is very sudden, very rare, and then disappears just as suddenly. The next term I have is for fictosexual. And someone who identifies as fictosexual has a sexual attraction towards fictional characters. And this is often used as an umbrella term to define different characters, because in my research I did find that they had specific terms for specific types of characters or specific specific archetypes. And just like a romantic, fictosexual can also be paired with others. For someone who is fictosexual, they might be attracted to, let's say, male presenting werewolves in the fictional universe. They're actually attracted to females in real life. So this can be paired with other identities as well. Next, I have phrasexual, and phrasexual is kind of different from demisexual. What phrasexual is someone who feels sexual attraction to somebody that they do not have deep connections with. However, once a deep connection or a bond is formed, that sexual attraction tends to fade away. So what would that look like by side when comparing it to demisexual? So demisexual is no feelings of sexual attraction to people, that there is no strong bond. However, those feelings increase after a strong bond is formed. So I have that represented here with a lock and key. Some of you may have heard of how it being homosexual means one door opens one way or the other. Bisexual, the door opens both ways and stuff like that. Or asexual is a wall. The way I think about demisexual is that it is a door with just a lock. There is no key. It was created without a key. The partner or partners who are with someone who is demisexual have to work together to make that key in order to unlock this lock. However, someone who is phrasexual, these feelings of sexual attraction are there with no strong bond, but those feelings slowly fade after that bond is formed. So I have, I have that represented over here by a lock that's getting ready to close. The lock is open, however, as those bonds get stronger and stronger, those sexual feelings start to fade away. Therefore, that lock is starting to close. Next, I have lithosexual, and I actually have another term for it here as well, achiosexual. And this is because the term litho means stone and is also in the lesbian community. Litho means a stone lesbian, which is someone who likes to give out sexual flavors. Wow, hello. Sexual favors and prefer not to have them reciprocated. So when we're talking about the asexual spectrum, a lithosexual is someone who prefers to have sexual attraction towards someone else, but does not want that sexual attraction reciprocated. And in many cases, when that sexual attraction is reciprocated, those sexual feelings do tend to fade over time. Then we have reciprosexual, and this is someone who experiences sexual attraction to a partner or partners when they know that their partners are sexually attracted to them. So it's a circular formation, and I'll show you that with how I have demisexual, phrasexual, and reciprosexual kind of sits next to each other. So we have demisexual, and again, sexual attraction when a strong bond is formed. And we have that person walking to that bond, that this bond is being made, this sexual attraction is starting to form. Then we have phrasexual, where the sexual attraction fades when that bond is made. So we have this person here walking away from this partner. It is reciprosexual when that sexual attraction forms, when the partner or partners feel sexual attraction to them. So we have this, it must go one way in order to go the other way. Lastly, we have cupiosexual. And someone who is cupiosexual usually tends to not feel sexual attraction to others. However, they do still desire some sexual relationships. And again, just like fictosexual and aromantic, this term can also be combined with other terms as well. For an example, someone who identifies as gray sexual can still want a sexual relationship with their partners, because it either feels good or they want to help make their partners feel happy, and this is an action they truly enjoy. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they feel that sexual attraction yet, or at all. So I do know that that was a lot of content to go over, so I will have a few minute pause right here. So if people want to ask questions, feel free to. There were a lot of different terms that I went over, and some of them were very similar to each other. So I will wait for a couple of minutes to see if anybody has any questions. That is a very good question. Thank you. The question that was asked was, what is a good resource to look further into some of these identities? I personally use the AVEN network, which is the Asexual Visibility and Education Network. It's a website that you can go on to. It's spelled AVEN. And yes. And that's where I get a lot of my information. I also use a fandom wiki where people talk about some of the lesser known identities. Some of them may or may not be official in the asexual spectrum, and I actually use some of them. For example, I use fictosexual because I feel like this gives a little bit more of a community for others who feel like there's just something that they would like to talk about with a community. But I like to use the internet, and the AVEN network is what I use a lot.
Trying to think of another question, but I don't know if you're going to go over this later. So for those who are watching either now or later and who have never been familiar with asexuality or aromanticism, or this type of spectrum of identity, why is it important? Why do you think it's important for them to learn more about asexual identity or these types of sexual orientations?
Well, I think it's important because, for instance, like I was talking about earlier, a lot of people feel broken when they don't experience sexual attraction to other people, or when people are judging them, like, hey, when have you had sex yet? Why aren't you having sex? You're a virgin. Come on. You want to die one? And another one for me was that, oh, when are you going to give me grandkids? Or when am I going to have nieces and nephews? Are you planning on having kids in the future? And how some people really just need that sense of community, because I really thought I was broken at one point, to the point where I wanted to talk to a doctor about it. But after I found the term like asexual and I did some more research and found demisexual, I finally felt like I wasn't broken. And I just want to make sure that like everybody feels that there's nothing wrong with them when it comes to this type of identity, because the way that heteronormative culture is right now is that you're expected to have sex at one point or another. You're expected to know what it is. You're expected to like it. However, that's not always true. And it's one of the reasons why I created this presentation, because I wanted to show people that, like, it's not always true, and we should never assume if someone's had sex or not, or assume if someone is sexually attracted to you or anything like that. All right, if there are no more questions, I think I shall continue. So we're going to go over a few more terms, just so that way we can give another side of the asexual spectrum. And this is how they feel towards sex. So an asexual who is into sexual intimacy, we would say that they are sex favorable. This usually means that they're extremely sex positive and may even sometimes seek out sex. And something I really want to reiterate here is that action does not equal attraction. If we look at in the past how gay men would get married to women and still have children, that is the action of having sex and having kids. However, that doesn't mean that they were sexually attracted to their wife. They were gay men, so they were sexually attracted to men. And that is the attraction. And notice how it doesn't equal there. So a lot of asexuals who are sex favorable often go through some identity crisis because they feel like they're not asexual because they do enjoy the act of sex. It feels good to them, they like it, they just don't find their partner or partners sexually attractive, which is completely valid. It is all right to enjoy the act, however, but it's a completely different idea when we come to the actual form of attraction. So asexuals love cake, right? To kind of help get a better idea, let's imagine you walk into a room and there is a cake on the table. Someone who is sex favorable might go up to the cake, cut themselves a slice, and have some cake because maybe cake sounded really good to them and seeing it in front of them just made them want to go for it. So next we have sex indifferent. They kind of fall in between sex favorable and sex adverse, which I will be going into after this. What sex indifference is that it's a very neutral idea about the behaviors about sexual intimacy. And it's just a basic indifference. They're kind of on the fence. They don't go one way or the other. They won't necessarily seek it out, but they won't shy away from it either. So let's go back to that cake example. Cake on the table, someone who identifies as sex indifferent might go up to the cake, might inspect it. Maybe they'll have a slice, maybe not. It's how they're feeling up at that point. Next, we have sex adverse, and this is someone who identifies with a generalized disinterest in sexual activity or behavior. For a long time, I identified as sex adverse. I didn't like talking about sex. Listening about people having sex really made me uncomfortable. I would sit through it because it's like friends going into their experiences, and I want to be there for my friends. So I have done some work. I am a little bit more sex indifferent now than I am sex adverse. However, it does still make me a little uncomfortable. So let's say I were to walk into a room with that cake on the table. Someone like myself who is sex adverse might just sit away from the cake. I won't go look at it. I'm not going to touch it. Other people can have it. I'm not going to. I'll sit in the back of the room. Then we have someone who is sex repulsed. Now, this is a little bit more on the extreme side of sex adverse. When someone identifies as sex repulsed, it's a really deep disgust and an extreme disinterest in the idea of sex. Someone who is sex repulsed might walk away from the conversation or just say, hey, can we change the subject? So again, when we talk about the cake in the room, they might not even go into the room once they see the cake. they'll walk away and just not engage at all. My last term here is sex ambivalent, and this is for someone who doesn't really know how they feel about sex. They have very mixed feelings about the idea of it. Some of them can be very positive, some of them can be very negative, and most of the time this happens at the same time. This is for someone who doesn't really feel like they fit in with any of the other feelings towards sexual intimacy. So I promise I'll only talk about cake one more time. So, cake in the room, someone who is sex ambivalent might inspect it, they might not know what's going on, they might not know what flavor of cake it is, they might try to taste it, or they might just go into the back of the room because maybe it has nuts and they have a nut allergy. Now, I know some of those terms could be a little confusing as well, so I do have another stop checkpoint in. So I just want to check in with everybody. How is everyone feeling so far? Does anybody have any comments or questions that they would like to ask? And I'm willing to wait for a few minutes as well for this one. So feel free. Confused about sexual identity. If you don't mind my asking, what is it that you are confused about? Are you just generally questioning your sexual identity? Is it a different feeling? Because it's also very valid to be confused about your sexual identity. It took me, I think, about 2 years to finally come to the fact. Okay. Yeah, and you know what? That's perfectly fine. It's okay. Sexuality, whether you're allosexual or asexual, is a spectrum and you can fluctuate all the time. And I'm on the gender identity, I'm questioning my identity as well. So uh, a lot of the time you can either experiment or do some research to look into different terms that feel like they connect well, or if they don't connect well. uh, I've heard a lot of people just identifying as queer because they just know they're not straight, uh, or of that nature. And I hope that seeing some of these might spark some interest and might um, push you into looking into some of these identities, because being able to find that night, I call it the nice happy medium, where I know I'm not like everybody else, but I'm happy with where I'm at. And I couldn't do that until I found the term demisexual. So were there any questions you had in particular and how to uh, help with that journey, or did you have a generalized comment? Okay, you're very welcome, and you're welcome. Uh, Even after I finish with this presentation, if anybody wants to stay behind, I can answer even more questions if you would like, and we can have a discussion. I have no problem with helping other people with that. All right. So if there are no more questions, I will. Oh, you're very welcome. Uh, I will get working. We'll go on. So now we're gonna do the conversations piece. So whenever you're talking about sexual intimacy, it is very key to have open communication with your partner or partners, whether that be just talking about how you're feeling that day to what your boundaries are when it comes to certain aspects of intimacy. And one of the aspects I would like everybody to talk about, or that I'm going to talk about anyway, is the differences between physical and sexual contact. And it's not just contact, it's what is the differences between physical and sexual intimacy for people? Because everybody has a different definition as to what is a physical contact for them versus what is a sexual contact for them. And this really came to mind when my roommate and I were talking the other day. And we were talking about how cuddling was a very physical form of attraction, and it's just a physical contact. It's not necessarily considered sexual to either of us. It's a form of intimacy that doesn't require the use of genitals. However, when my roommate and I were talking about kissing, they found that kissing was a sexual intimacy behavior, and how when you start kissing someone, it is the leading into the sexual acts and the sexual intimacy. Whereas I found kissing just to be a nice physical contact for a form of intimacy that can be shown in public. And we had a really nice, deep conversation about how when people kiss each other, it's not necessarily a sexual act for some, but it is a sexual act for others. So having that conversation with with partners is very important, because something as simple as kissing can be seen as sexual, and maybe they don't want to do that. So when you're going into this conversation, asking which touches that your partner is comfortable with should be very high up in that list. It's very important to talk about, because there is a fine line. Or for me, for instance, kissing is fine. I actually thoroughly enjoy kissing people. However, when we start doing like makeout sessions, that's when it turns from physical to sexual for me. So that is my line when it comes to kissing. I am okay with kiss here and there, but when there is like French kissing involved or more wandering hands, that's when it becomes sexual for me, and that's not what I'm about. I would prefer to just cuddle if that's going to be the action that's going to happen. So sometimes this does mean we have to form a boundary when it comes to certain things. I know some people enjoy it when others have their hand behind their backs and just having that comforter hand right in the crook. Or some of them like it when their butts are being touched. I personally do not. However, other people do, and they're fine with that being public or being private as well. So learning where that line is a key point in this conversation and relationship. So for those of you who are attending, if you would like to say, what physical touches are you comfortable with? What are some physical touches that you like with your having with your partners? You can either go to this poll everywhere link, or you can text Fire PRN, and I will wait for a few minutes. Just because I'm curious, I want to see what everybody thinks when it comes to physical touch. And if you've never thought about this question before, what physical touch do you feel most comfortable with? And for those watching in the future, if you want to like write them down on a piece of paper just to see, uh, just to see what can be considered physical for you, what physical touches are you comfortable with? Non-sexual cuddling is my fave. Yes, I definitely agree. Holding hands, odd touch. Hugs, yes, hugs are amazing. I love hugs. I feel like with the ability to hug others, I can send my energy into somebody else to help them uh, cope with whatever they're dealing with or to send positive vibes their way. When it comes to physical touch, I love hugs. So whenever I ask somebody if they would like to hug, that's kind of me just making sure they're okay if I'm okay to give them a hug and do that energy transfer. A kiss on the forehead. Yes, I've never been kissed on the forehead myself, but I love that idea. I think it's adorable and it's a great way to show affection. Or at least, and again, this can be different for somebody else, but I'm loving what I'm seeing here. I'll wait a few more moments. Not quite sure about what this hate one it goes for. All right, so to kind of go with the what physical touch are you comfortable with? Uh, oh, what sexual touch are you comfortable with? What are touches that you consider sexual when it comes to intimacy? I consider making out to be a sexual act, and I consider when people touch my butt to be sexual. And again, this differs from person to person. And if you don't want to respond, you don't have to. This is completely anonymous, and I will do my best to make sure I'm not saying anything. Holding the small of the back. Not at all. Yep, I feel that one. I, not at all. Yeah. All right, we shall continue. So then we've talked a lot about what happens when these conversations go towards the sexual behaviors. So what happens when they don't go towards those sexual behaviors? Uh, so sometimes we do just have to be respectful whenever we hear the word no. And I do have the acronym of SEAT here. So the S stands for stop immediately. So if a partner says that they no longer want to continue this action or they don't want to do this action at all, stopping immediately and then establishing that you recognize that they have asked you this question and told you to stop, so that way being able to do so uh, will show that you're showing respect to their decisions. If they haven't already suggested doing something else, maybe you should and ask about doing something else. Let's say someone was trying to have sex in a bedroom and they're like, I'm not really feeling this tonight. Can we actually just watch a movie? Or let's play a game? Or let's go out to eat? Changing the subject so that way you can so that way it can be shown that you hear and understand, and let's do something else to spend time together. And then lastly, thank your partners. Let them know that you understand that what's going on and that you want to respect them as much as you can. And starting off with just thanking them for voicing their boundaries is very helpful. And it can be hard to say no sometimes. And it's okay to say no, even if you feel like you can't. It's just be firm when you're saying no. And think about how it would feel if somebody asked if you wanted to go out to the park and then they brought their bike. Like, I thought it was going to be a nice little walk. How would you feel if someone said no? Or if you said yes and you didn't even bring a bike? So being able to have that boundary and being able to say no, sorry, to say no is very important. And once a boundary is made and established, stick to it. And I know this can be hard. So one way to stick to a boundary is to remind yourself of it sometimes. I have stickers all over my room to show that I'm trying to break down uh, the the binary system that has been in my head for a long time. So I have stickers all over my room that have all of my pronouns that I'm experimenting with. So that way I can see them and reiterate them in my head and be like, this is my new boundary of these are my pronouns. These are what I identify as, not what anybody else identifies me as. This is what I identify as. So I find repetition to be very helpful for establishing a boundary. And little reminders help out as well. So, just out of curiosity, how would you start a conversation on sexual intimacy with a partner or partners? How would you go about making this conversation with somebody? And this doesn't even have to be somebody on the asexual spectrum. This can be anybody who falls on the allosexual or on the asexual spectrum. It is a generalized idea of how would you start this conversation? Um, I'll give you an example. The way I would say is, "Hey, I just want to let you know that I'm demisexual. I don't really uh partake in sexual behaviors. I like cuddling though. Do you like cuddling?" That's how I would start the conversation with my partners or partner. Nice. Yeah. Uh, Sometimes it can be as simple as asking a question or just bringing up how someone feels. Yeah. Ask them what they like to do. Yeah. Ask them, get to know what they are comfortable with. I like that. And that's okay. Uh, never tried to have a relationship. That's perfectly fine. No one should ever force you into a relationship. So then, instead of a sexual or romantic relationship, how would you talk about any sort of conversation with maybe a friendship? And you know what? Sometimes friendship is better. Uh, my roommate and I have plans that if nothing works out, we're just going to live together and raise a family if we wanted to. Because platonic relationships are just as important as romantic and sexual relationships. All right, for the sake of time, I am going to move on. So, here are some things I really want people to remember when they think about this conversation, or if you're going to rewatch this presentation. And it's that asexuality is a spectrum, just like gender, just like allosexuality. It is, people fall on different areas on this spectrum. And sometimes maybe they don't even want to use the spectrum because they just want to identify as themselves because they have their own preferences. And not everyone defines physical and sexual intimacy the same way. So being able to start conversations about how what physical attraction and physical acts are you okay with performing and what sexual acts are you okay with partaking in, and having that conversation with others can be very validating. In action does not equal attraction. Just because someone does not want to have the actual act of sex does not mean that they don't love you or they don't have that attraction towards you. Sometimes it's just not a sexual attraction. Maybe it's a romantic attraction or a platonic attraction. But the key difference is that action just is completely separate from attraction. They're two very different terms. And lastly, everyone is valid. Being able to question your sexuality and your gender makes it that much easier to be who we are, and having that freedom to do so can give you room to grow. So you do not have to say about anything that may have stuck with you through this presentation, or if you're watching in the future, maybe there were some notes that you took down and there's words that are stuck out to you. So I'm just curious, what are some words or small phrases that have stuck with you through this presentation? What is something that you find very important, and what are you going to take out of this presentation? Gray sexual. I learned about gray sexual when I was doing my research on like what asexuality was and what demisexuality was. And I thought that term was very useful for some people. I don't think it really helped me, but when I found graysexual, I looked further and found demisexual, and I was able to figure out my own identity. So yeah, graysexual is a great term to remember. Yes, thank you. Talking about how discussions about intimacy and why in sex education work it is encouraged to learn about the ace community because it is such a big community with people who feel different ways. I know in my research I found that a lot of asexuals felt like they weren't actually asexual because they did like the act of sex, but that is an action and not an attraction. What we're validating is, yeah, you can enjoy the act of sex. You also don't have to be sexually attracted to that person. That's idea of action and attraction being equal is um just so muddled sometimes, and it's why I like to keep them separate, because action doesn't always equal attraction, and attraction doesn't always equal action, as we saw and talk about with how gay men in the past married women just so that way they could stay in the closet basically and not get harmed because it wasn't seen as openly acceptable as it was back then. But now we have a better understanding of how that all works. Right. So I'm gonna move forward. So there are some resources that if you want to look more into it, WMU's Office of LGBT Student Services is a great place to go to if you have any questions or concerns. And if you're looking for a place for community, they are very great. And then, like I had mentioned earlier, the AVEN network, or AVEN, I don't know why I keep adding a network to it, but we'll go with it. um, is also a great source to go to. It's a blog where people can talk about and have deep discussions about the different identities that fall into the asexual spectrum and being able to just find other people that feel and think like you do. And there is the Trevor Project that does do a little bit about asexuality as well. I do have my resources here. If anybody is curious about them, I'll leave them up there for another few moments. Other than that, I think I'm all set if everybody else is. Does anybody have any questions or you're welcome. Is there any questions that people have or anything they would like to talk about?
I just wanted to thank you again for this great workshop, and and being able to do it live streamed and through YouTube, and then also sharing it on our Facebook. I will also post in the chat again the attendance URL for the signature. For WMU signature. But no, I really appreciate this. I learned a lot. I'm always learning a lot, and that's the reason why I love doing this work, because I don't want to be stagnant in my learning.
Right.
Well, if there's no other questions, thank you again. I'll go ahead and stop the live stream so that way folks can stay after and ask
Yeah, I was
questions.
gonna say if anyone wants to discuss anything that's like not filmed, hang on a second.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and stop live stream.